Thanks for having me.
So Andy, this is a stock we've talked about a few times on this show. We mentioned the DIY kind of increase in this trend. This is a company that have announced their focus on expansion through partnerships. They want to increase their online presence. They're doing a bunch of different things to kind of beat the trend. So they have earnings pre-market on Wednesday, and I'm seeing that your purchase intent data shows an uptick. Can you explain that a little bit for us?
Sure. So what LikeFolio is doing on Advanced Auto Parts here, and this purchase intent data is showing people talking about actually purchasing the products, going into the stores, and doing business with Advanced Auto Parts. And you can see from our purchase intent chart, these are quarterly bars. And so I tried to highlight on the right side there, 2018's Q1 and Q2 versus 2019's Q1 and Q2. And so what they're going to be reporting this week is 2019 Q1. And you can see a significant increase there year over year versus 2018. And then the initial look at Q2 is also very strong, a very strong beginning for Q2. So we think that the company is going to report really nice numbers and have an optimistic view of the rest of the year. Now, there's one caveat on this data. Advanced Auto Parts is a very low sample size for us. And so historically, we haven't had a whole lot of data to work with, and so we have to take that with a grain of salt. But just like you referenced, Jenny, I think it's important to note the macro trend and the tailwind that this company has, and that is in do-it-yourself auto maintenance, which we have seen on a continuous basis year over year, seeing big gains in terms of that do-it-yourself mentality among consumers. And that's a tailwind that Advanced Auto Parts is going to be riding, and we think is boding very well for the company.
Two things I have to ask you about, Andy. Number one, is Advanced Auto Parts, is this getting lumped in? I mean, this stock has broke pretty hard here in the last month. Is this stock getting lumped in with the whole retail sell-off that we've seen? And number two, is your data, is there any age demographic in your data? Because it's hard for me to believe that millennials are fixing their own cars.
Yeah, no, I know. It's one of those things that's tough. We don't break down any demographics. Our demographics are essentially the same as active social media users.
Got it.
And so you can take that for what it's worth. But the important thing is to compare it versus itself. And so whatever the demographics are and whatever that distortion is, it's there every single time we measure, and we're seeing that increase year over year. That's quite striking, and we're also seeing an increase in the overall industry. So yeah, I think the stock's suffering because of some retail woes and some concerns over the costs of the parts and things like that. But they have a lot of good things going for them. Jenny mentioned a partnership with Walmart, which is pretty exciting. Walmart's essentially setting up a do-it-yourself auto maintenance store online that essentially is a front for Advanced Auto Parts, which we think could be very good for the company.
Yeah, and you mentioned, we talked about this DIY trend a lot. This is something that I think can benefit from this online presence, because up until this point, I don't really think there's been one. And so that was definitely reflected on social media today. But I have to say, not a ton of noise about this company. I don't think it's very millennial popular, to answer your question, Kevin. Not that I wouldn't appreciate fixing my own car, but I don't have a car, and I think I'm not alone.
First you would have to buy a car.
Exactly.
For you to fix it.
Exactly. So our first tweet is from Mitchell Warren, who says, genuine parts fell for a 6th consecutive week, but the stock did print a bullish hammer candlestick on the retest of the 2-year trend line. 2 other auto part makers, AutoZone and Advanced Auto Parts, both report earnings this week. So what can we really be watching in their earnings report this week?
Go ahead. I have thoughts. I want to hear yours, though.
I actually have a question more for Andy, so I want to hear what yours is.
Go ahead.
Mine's more of a follow-up for Andy that's unrelated to that. For me, this is going to be about the entire industry of do-it-yourself and their outlook going forward, as we've seen for all the companies. So I don't. This isn't one that I have, 2 eyes on at all times. I gotta be honest. I don't have a car either. So
we have one car on this whole show, Andy.
The millennials.
Well, look, I'll tell you what. Who is fixing their own car, and that's the drivers that are taking you guys around. These Uber drivers and Lyft drivers are putting an extreme amount of miles on their car, and it gets very costly to maintain. And so that's another tailwind for this company. The people that do own cars are having to fix them more often and are doing it themselves.
That's a really, really interesting point. The one other question I had for you, Andy, is I'm looking at Advanced Auto Parts, and although it's kind of flattened out in terms of stock performance maybe over the last 6 months, it's had a pretty strong run in terms of where you're comparing to last year and now. And although you're seeing growth in terms of purchase intent mentions, are you seeing that the stock price is reflective of that already?
No, I think this recent downturn presents an opportunity. If the stock was up at 180 or 185 like it was, then I would say yes. The opportunity, that's priced in already. I think with the pullback, you've got, I'm not a market technician, but I think that there's at least some indication that there's some support near where the price is currently, and so we're going into the earnings with a bullish outlook. And more importantly, I think longer term, this company's well positioned in a growing trend and is getting the right partnerships in place. And so, from a long-term perspective, if you get beat on this earnings, it may not be a bad idea to get some of the stock at a lower price.
Now, just to reference, our next tweet is from Gone Green, who says, Advanced Auto Parts working off support might be ready to get above 170 as it heads into earnings next week. Now, earnings are obviously Wednesday this week. So, Andy, you did mention comparing Advanced Auto Parts against itself, but how does it fare against a competitor like AutoZone, who also has earnings this week?
I think that they're all benefiting from the same, macro environment, and they all are facing the same pressures from some of the China trade stuff. But what I think it separates Advanced Auto Parts from some of the others is this partnership with Walmart. I think that's exactly in their demographic line. That's exactly their customer base. And so instead of having to get people to go to advancedautoparts.com, they can simply fulfill these orders through a normal Walmart.com shopper, which I think is a huge advantage for the company.
Andy, you kind of led to my last question here, which is, of all these names that Jenny just mentioned in the do-it-yourself, who's the leader in this space? Is it Advanced Auto Parts? Are they clearly the leader there?
I think they are. I think that from our data, their growth is the leader.
Got it.
I'm not sure market cap wise or revenue wise who the leader is, but from a growth perspective in terms of consumer demand, they are the one that we like the best in terms of getting consumers on board and doing the right things in terms of partnerships. So looks pretty good for Advanced Auto Parts.
And I think the one thing that we've kind of just brushed over a couple times with that our partnership with Walmart in terms of the e-commerce side of this is really a story that you can basically put on any sector, any industry, and that's going to be your path to growth. So I agree with what you're saying there in terms of maybe their outlook looks better than some of their competitors. But to me, just to kind of wrap up what the data is showing not only is this entire sector growing in terms of do-it-yourself auto maintenance mentions growing over the last year, but it's also showing that, AAP, Advanced Auto Parts, is doing better than it was last year in terms of consumer purchase intent mentions, and you're looking at the stock price trade, like as it's traded downwards to this level of support that we're maybe seeing as an opportunity to maybe get into this name.
Yeah, you wrapped it up really nicely there. Those are the 3 points I would make. It's a good company in a industry that has a good trend, and the stock's on a pullback. That's and our data is very supportive of a bullish outlook for the company, and so I like when all those things converge.